And welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, it's just welcome. My name is Rusty, and this is my channel where I talk about my favorite horror movies, mostly movies. My favorite movies, mostly horror movies, and my favorite music, mostly metal. And we are on day 3 of Zombie Fest, my first Zombie Fest. There will be many to come. And we are moving on. I'm going to spotlight today a little movie that I love called The Night Eats the World. Isn't it interesting that the cover art to this movie looks a whole lot like As Above, So Below, that found footage movie, which I also love. It will be in found footage week. But this movie, that's the first thing I noticed about it. I'm like, I thought that was As Above, So Below, but it looks very much like it. The Night Eats the World. Now, The Night Eats the World was released in 2018. It was directed by Dominique Rocher. It was written by Agarmen. And it stars Anders Danielsen, Golshifteh Farahani, and Denis Lavantr. Obviously French folks. But, yes. So, The Night Eats the World is set in Paris. And we are introduced to a guy named Sam. Now, he is showing up at a party of his friend Jenny. And he comes in and he's like, I didn't know anybody would be here. I think this was supposed to be an ironic twist. He's not very sociable. He doesn't like to be around people. So she's got this apartment full of people having a party, and he's there to pick up his tapes. He's a musician. So he's there to pick up his tapes, and there's all these people around, and she's busy. Let me, have a drink. I'll get your stuff. It's back there in the office, whatever. So he sits around all uncomfortable and shy and having a few drinks, gets a little bit hammered, gets tired of waiting for her, and goes back there to the office to get away from all the people and noise, and locks himself in the room. He locks the door so nobody will interrupt him. And, because gosh, there's 70 people there. He finds his tapes, but he's hammered, so he just sits back in a chair and goes to sleep. Now, when he wakes the next morning, and right before he went to sleep, he heard a bunch of noise out there in the party. He thought he heard a couple of screams. He thought a little rambunctious, but then again, they were already that way, so he didn't pay much attention, and then he passed out. So he wakes up the next morning, and he opens the door, and he can't see anyone. But he also notices, there's blood all over the walls. Everything is, strewn about and torn up and stuff. So he puts down his tapes, and he grabs, a lamp post or something. But he starts, walking through the place, wondering what the hell. And he sees all this mess. He goes to the door, and he opens up the door, and you see what's obviously Jenny is sitting there on the top step, and another one beside her. And when he says, Jenny, what the fuck's going on? She turns around, and she is half of her face is gone, and she is a zombie, and so is the other one, and they attack. He gets the door shut, right? So he manages to get the door shut, and what the fuck's going on? So now he's freaking out. He goes to the windows and he looks and he sees chaos. He sees chaos everywhere. He sees people being attacked across the street. in the windows. He sees a guy come run out and get into a car with his family, and his family follows, or he manages to get into the car. Then these, I guess maybe his wife and a kid, they come and try to get in the car, and doesn't quite make it though. The passenger side, the zombie gets him, and like the whole car, it looks like rats on a piece of carrion, like that movie Requiem. That game, the rat game Requiem on Steam, where the rats are just all around this. So yeah, the car fills up with zombies, and they're eating them people. So he is, as you can imagine, freaked out. He sees the zombie attacks everywhere. He starts searching the apartment for anything that could help him. Like going through the guest clothes. That, how everybody piles up their jackets and stuff on a bed at a party. So he starts going through them, and he finds people's phones, and he listens to their messages where he hears people screaming, your dad is attacking me. It was just all kind of horrible messages that are being sent to the people that were in there. So he hears the phone messages about the apocalypse. He manages to venture up to the roof, because this is the top floor apartment. So he's like up on the roof. He don't know what to do. He sees all of this chaos around him. So he basically barricades himself into this apartment, even though it wasn't his apartment. He barricades himself into it. He's scared to go outside. And he is like, days have gone by now. And he is cleaning the floor. And he hears a noise. And a big explosion happens next to him, like on the floor. And that freaked him out. It made me nearly jump out this chair. And he manages to get up, and he looks down the hole, and it's a guy sitting in a chair that had just shotgunned himself. So he makes the hole big enough to get in, to go down in there. And he goes down in there, and it turns out to be a couple. Obviously, it was a boom situation with everything that was going on. So it gave him another room to explore for any kind of helpful supplies. So he gathers supplies in the shotgun and explores the hallway, where he discovers that he's pretty much got the building to himself. It's not a huge apartment complex. It looks like about 3 stories maybe, and 3 or 4 floors maybe, and it's not huge. There's like a couple of apartments on each floor, so it's not a huge complex or anything. It's a small apartment building, and it looks kind of like he's got it to himself. So he explores the hall. He manages to barricade the front doors of the atrium, and of course, all of the bars, the windows have bars on them, so he feels pretty safe that no one can, get in. And he then begins to search the apartments for supplies, like, I'm going to need food, I'm going to need water, I'm going to need whatever. So he's basically going through all these apartments looking at him. And then we get a nice scare when he goes into one apartment, and it's a family. There's a family in there. It's a man and a woman and their little girl, about 8 or 9. They're zombies. They come after him, but he manages to get away from them, shut the door, lock it, and because he had went down and got the room keys, so he puts a big X on that door, like, don't go in there. But everything else seemed to be fine. There wasn't anyone else left in any one of the apartments. So He continues to check and gather for supplies. Um, he finds an infected guy in the elevator. It's one of those elevators that's just the gate, like it's not a boxed in elevator. It's a elevator that doesn't have walls. It is just a gate. So he locks down the elevator with a belt, like to make sure that the thing can't get out. It's like a middle-aged man, and he doesn't kill him or anything. He just leaves it in there. So he then, now that he's got his own apartment, back, he takes everything of his supplies down to his own apartment. That's where he's hoarding everything. And he starts coming up with a ration plan. What am I going to do? Because, of course, he's checking outside. He sees the chaos. The place is surrounded by zombies. This particular zombie is, I don't know if I compare it to, it's not like the quarantine zombies. They're not super slow. They're not super fast. Well, I started to say they were like a certain movie, but that's my next movie, so I better not say that. Because, every zombie movie has its own zombie lore, its own the way the zombies look and behave. This is more traditional zombies. They're obviously infected, and they sit kind of just until they have a body to get or someone to attack. They pretty much just stand there twitching. So he tries to come up with a ration plan for his supplies, and he starts learning how to live barricaded alone in this apartment complex. And it definitely starts affecting his mind. He realizes he smells a bad smell, and it's those people that, So he starts to throw them out off the balcony, but he can't. So he ends up like picking that apartment. He cleans it out, and he puts them in their apartment and sort of seals up the door. He zips them up in sleeping bags, and I guess he does what he can to keep it isolated. So I personally would have tossed them off the balcony. I know it sounds mean, but I don't know if I want, decaying bodies like across the hall. That can't be healthy. You know what I mean? So he's having really cool nightmares, as you can imagine. The water finally goes off. He is going a bit stir crazy, setting in. I call him Elevator Zed, the EZ. He ends up like, he'll just go and sit there in a chair with a cigar, and he'll just have a conversation with this trapped Elevator Zed. So that's kind of interesting. I mean, what are you going to do, right? There's nobody else to talk to. So that's kind of funny, but he is so desperately in need of that, which I think is the ironic twist that the director or writer did. Because remember, at the beginning of the movie, he hates people. He's not social. He doesn't want to be around people. And baby, you just finally got your wish, and it ain't turning out exactly the way you thought it was, is it? Because you're talking to a zombie. You're carrying on a conversation with a zombie. Now, he realizes who this zombie is. It's a middle-aged, retired doctor. So he like has conversations with, the zombie don't talk back. But he carries on a conversation, well, what do you think about this situation? And here you thought you were going to be retired and have a good life, and ain't working out for you, is it? No, not working out for any of us. So he has these things, he gets so desperate for company that when he sees a cat, and this was pretty rough, but he sees a cat out there. So despite the fact there's zombies everywhere, he goes down to like a side door where he saw the cat, and he tries to tempt the cat to come in because it would be company of some kind. The cat, however, runs off, and I'm like, dude, you're not that desperate that you're going to go out there in Zombieland and try to get the cat. But he does. So he goes out there and he's like, where are you? You know, he goes down a little bit and he finally sees it and he starts to get, and boom, there's a zombie, comes after him. He barely makes it back inside. And I'm like, all for a cat? Really? That desperate, huh? I mean, you got Zed Man. That cat can't carry on no more conversation than the Zed Man can, elevator Zed, so I don't know, but whatever. It's not like we're going to make rational choices in the middle of stir crazy, right? So he gets back in, but the rough part about it is that when he gets back up to his apartment, he is so angry because when he looks down, this was mean. But when he looks down, he sees the cat, right? And he sees the cat doing what cats do. You know how they snuggle up to your feet if you're standing there? They will rub up against you with their little tail. And he sees the cat purring and rubbing up against a zombie. And it makes him so mad that he fucking shotguns the cat. They don't show that, but he's so angry that the cat chose the zombie over him that he killed the cat, right, for snuggling up to the zombie. So you're like, okay, you're losing it. Talk about jealousy. So that's when he notices, though, that he got scratched on his leg. Because, like I told you, he barely made it back in. As you can imagine, he flipped the fuck out. He flipped the fuck out. And he starts crying and freaking out and stuff like that. So he goes and sits in a chair with the shotgun, and he's got the shotgun up under his chin, and he's got a mirror sitting there. And I guess what he's doing is at the first sign of anything, then he's going to air out his head. So he probably sat there for hours because now it's nighttime and you see him still sitting there like this, and he's fallen asleep. So he's fallen asleep and his head slowly rolls to the side, and when he does, that shotgun goes off and you're like, oh yeah, that was good. And that was an interesting scene because you're sitting there watching him fall asleep, and is it Fissin? Oh my god. But that was funny. And then once that happens, of course, he looks at the mirror, he looks at himself, and he realizes that he was scratched, but he had not been infected. So he didn't know whether he had been bitten or scratched or what. And even if he was, even if he knew he was scratched, he didn't know whether that was going to infect him or not. But obviously you've got to get body fluids into you. So he wasn't infected. And he keeps hearing things at night and seeing things, and you're not sure whether it's his mentality going or what. So his, he thought a couple of times that he saw someone across the street, through another window, but he's never sure. And he swears sometimes that he hears people in the hall, but again, he's not sure. So, but he still has this suspicion that maybe there's somebody alive in the building next door. So this has been going on for months. You understand? Now, of course, your question might be, why aren't the zombies dead? I've heard that before in other zombie movies where they're going, well, can't we just wait them out and they'll starve? I guess it's according to what kind of, what if they are undead? the undead can't die, right? They'll just continue to just be that way until they're, who knows. But he gets so lonely. There's this room where a kid that liked punk rock obviously was. He has a drum set and stuff like that. He got so lonely that he goes into that room one day and he just starts playing the drums as loud as he can play the drums. And he's just like kicking ass on the drums until, of course, 100 zombies come running from nearby neighborhoods because they hear a noise. And he basically did all of that to have something around. And, and you're like sitting there going, well, yeah, it's not the kind of company you wanted, dude. But that was interesting that he would do that. So they surround the building, and once again, it's going to take them, who knows, a silence before they drift back away. Because that's the reason that they had drifted away, is because, they're zombies and they're going to go where the noise is. So if you keep your area relatively quiet, they're going to eventually go away. Haven't you ever played Project Zomboid? But, so he hears something again that night like he's used to hearing. And this time, though, it's real. And there's something at his door where he's got his bed. There's something at his bedroom door. And he grabs the shotgun because he's had this nightmare 100 times where they break in and finally get him. So when the door starts rattling, he blows a hole through that door. And when he goes out there, it was not a zombie. It's a girl. And named Sarah. Is that her name? Sarah? Yeah, I think so. Sarah, yeah. So he manages to save her. He goes out there. He's like, oh my God, oh my God. He puts her on the bed. He digs out the shotgun pellets from her abdomen and stuff like that. And he manages to save her. And they talk, once she's healed up enough, they talk about the situation. He asks about her, how she's survived, vice versa. So they carry on and get to know each other. He shows her how he lives. And they're slowly running out of supplies. So make sure I got it in the right order. Okay. So he's running out of supplies. So he remembers the last apartment, right, that he can clean out. What is it? You've cleaned out every apartment. You've been here for months, isolated in this place. That family. So he goes down there and he uses a drill to cut a hole in the door. And of course they were making noise, so he waits for them to banging on the door. But after he gets the hole in there, he goes away and he be's quiet for a little bit. And then he comes back to the door and picks them off one at a time, including the little girl. So the last one is like, he bangs on the door, gets the little girl coming that way and blows her away. So he goes in there and finds, there was a child there, so obviously the cabinets are going to be full of food. So he gets all of this food and he goes back up to his apartment with these new supplies and can't find Sarah. And he goes to the roof where he does find her. And she's like, I've been living on the rooftops from building to building, and I've never stayed in one place this long. I guess she's been there like 2 weeks or something. And they kind of have this argument about, she's like, I'm leaving. I'm going to move on. And he's like, but we're safe here. And she's like, yeah, but you doing stupid shit like playing the drums and getting all of them. you're either going to go insane and blow your brains out, or you are going to finally cause them to come in. Because it's been months. If rescue was coming, wouldn't it have come by now? So she makes good points. Especially considering what you're about to find out. So they argue about leaving, and she doesn't want to stay. And he finally agrees that she's correct. That they should take their supplies and that they should go and try to find maybe if there is a safe haven somewhere or something like that. And he goes downstairs. And then we see him sitting in a chair. Where we realize that everything that we have just seen, okay? Everything that we have just seen, from the moment that he was on that bed digging out the stuff from her abdomen to now, was a delusion. He did not save her. He never got the stuff. I mean, he did get the stuff out of her, but she's dead there on the bed and rotting. So he has been like stuck in this, I can't believe I just killed the only live person I've seen in months. For who knows how long. But it's obviously been a good few days. And that got me because I'm like, I did not see that coming. So from the moment he shot her, got her up, and put her on the bed and digging out and was safe, from the moment that happened and she walked through the door the next day, that morning, because this happened at night. So that morning when she came around the corner and started talking to him in the kitchen was a delusion. She was actually dead. She had never got off the bed. He had killed her with that shotgun. So he is looking at her gear because she's got a bunch of like mountain climbing gear. That's how she's been living from roof to roof. So that part was true, and the reason that he knew that in his delusion was because it's right there in front of you. Her climbing gear and her backpack and all. So he's looking through it and he finds a camera, and he's looking at the pictures on the camera of her and her family. And then he sees pictures of himself standing up on the roof, letting him know that all of those times that he thought he had saw someone across the street, there was someone across the street. It was her. And she had even took pictures of him standing up there on the roof. So that made him even sadder, So he ends up going, well, even in my delusion, I knew that I need to do something, that I am going to lose my mind if I stay here. So the first thing he does is he goes and gets all of her splunking gear, her mountain climbing gear, and gets it all ready. He's obviously going to leave. And then he goes up, he goes and lets the elevator zombie out. Now, I told you these aren't like super fast zombies. So he for some reason knew that this zombie wasn't going to go after him. It was very strange, but it was poignant. It was a poignant moment because he did stay away from him. But what I'm saying is he let him out and he was making the zombie sound and all. And he stays about 6 feet in front of him. And he basically leads him up the stairs. The zombie follows him. And he goes to this man's room. And he opens the door to his apartment. And then he stands back. And the zombie comes in walking. And instead of the zombie coming at him, the zombie turns and goes into his own apartment. And it almost it made him tear up because he knew somewhere deep down in that zombie was still that man. And so he goes into his room and the guy closes it because he knows he's fixing to burn the place down anyway. because he has fucking lost his mind. So he at least lets the zombie die, I guess, in his own apartment. He goes and he takes all of his musical tapes, puts them in a tub, sets them on fire. The building is on fire now. That sets off the fire alarm. That is not something that you want to happen in a zombie apocalypse, because hundreds of zombies are now banging on the windows and doors. They manage to bust the door open. He grabs his stuff. They chase him up there. And yeah, I kind of thought to myself, didn't you disable the fire alarm before you didn't? Okay, stir crazy. I understand you're not thinking clearly. So he gets up to the roof. There's a lot of zombie action between his apartment and the roof because them bitches are after him. He manages to kill a few of them, gets on the roof. One more. He manages to throw his thing a couple of times until he hooks onto the other building. And this zombie almost gets to him, and he just like jumps off on the rope. Now, of course, boom, he hits the side of the wall of that roof. I mean, of the building across the street. And it knocks his ass out cold. So he's basically just hanging there in midair. You know, he's just hanging there in midair. And hours go by, and he finally comes to. And the window next to him, there's this old zombie lady like scratching the window at him. So he's like, oh my God. So he pulls himself up, he gets onto the roof, and then he looks out over the city of rooftops. You know, like, is this how he's going to have to live? Because there's silence, and rooftops is all that you see. And then that's what, you know, that's when the movie ends and the credits roll. So, what did I love about this film? There's only 3 movies that I know like this. And this one was the first one. There's The Night Eats the World. There's a South Korean movie called #Alive. And there's the American remake of this and #Alive called Alone. But I loved the imagination fuel that this movie gives you. Because we all think that we would survive a zombie apocalypse. We all fantasize, not in a good way, but I mean, you know, if you just think about it, if you're watching 28 Weeks Later or this or anything else, it's called imagination fuel. That's what movies are. Get over it. You know what I'm talking about. And we always think that none of us are going to think, oh, in a zombie apocalypse, I'm going to be killed in the first 5 minutes of the movie. Even though our luck may dictate that that's exactly what fucking would happen to me. We don't want to admit that, though. And we all kind of like wonder, well, this is what I would do. This is how I would survive it. This is, that's what movies are, is, imagination fuel. What I love about this movie is that it's a lot of that. We all think that we would survive it. My answer has always been to barricade and isolate. Well, that's what this dude did. He barricaded and isolated. But do you think about how are you going to get water when the water goes off? What are you going to do for electricity? What are you going to do when the electricity goes off? How are you going to deal with the isolation? How are you going to deal with the loneliness? How are you going to deal with the stir crazy? Day 1, day 10, day 14, day 37, 4 months, 6 months, all alone. You're going to have to venture out sometime, unless you learn how to eat paint off the walls. So, I love that this movie did that. That this movie took these things into consideration and told a story from the perspective of a barricaded and isolated person who is trying to survive that isolation while they're surrounded by zombies. and their options are very limited. And yeah, I liked it. I really liked that take. You know, it's a little different than a gang of 7 trying to escape, you know, Left 4 Dead 2 on Steam, you know. I liked seeing a movie from this perspective, a zombie movie from this perspective. It had plenty of action. Some people call it slow, but that's because a lot of the story is about how he is surviving this isolation. So, but there's plenty of zombie action. And yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. I haven't seen the hashtag Alive, but we'll talk about that later. The Night Eats the World, 2018. It's definitely worth having. And I do believe it is a French movie, but it is in English. It's not dubbed either. You know, there's no mouth dubbing. So, I think it's a French production, but there's no dubbing that I can tell. They're saying what's coming out of their mouth. It's not English dubbed over French mouth movements. So, yeah. The Night Eats the World. It's kind of a little difficult to find, but very worth it. And yes, I will see you on the next one. Thank you for joining me on day 3 of Zombie Fest. And I really love this movie. It's another 8 out of 10 to me. I think. Might have been a 9 out of 10. I don't know. What did I write? I wrote 8 out of 10. I really, really love it. Check it out if you get the chance. The Night Eats the World. Day 3 Zombie Fest on my channel. Love you, miss you, bye-bye. Always remember and never forget, even if you're not isolated and are surrounded by zombies, you're a very, very special and unique person, and don't let anyone ever tell you anything different. I really do appreciate you taking the time to like or comment or just hang out, but I'm going to keep doing them even if nobody watches, because I just love running my mouth about great movies and letting you know about those you may not have heard of. So, yeah. Love you, miss you, bye. See you in the next one.